Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley. Today I have a very special guest. He and I served together on a ship for 15 years out of a 20 and back for me. My 20 and back started with Kruger, and Herr Major was a Capitan then, and he recruited me to Nacht Waffen, where he was my commanding officer for the rest of the 20 and back. And he's not a public person. He has done other interviews also basically anonymously. And I think you're going to enjoy this. Welcome, Herr Major.
Oh, shucks, Penny. That sounds really nice.
Well, yeah. For my public, we have met real world. Was it last year? Just last year?
It was last year, but it feels like a lot longer than that.
Yeah. My partner Lou had made a comment after we met in April in Fresno and said, "Yeah, no, you two are too damn comfortable with each other for this to have been the first time you've met."
Well, yeah, it was just like seeing you again. So, yeah, but it feels way longer than 1 year ago. But I suppose it has been, so, you know.
Well, it was a little over a year. That was April, and then we met again in September in Vegas with a friend from Canada, and we stayed at another friend's house and spent a few days trekking all over southern Nevada.
That was fun.
That was.
America's always fun, and that was before the COVID craziness.
Yes.
And you know, the new normal. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Mean lockdowns and masks, and nobody's working regularly, and people are unable to pay their rent, and the economy is collapsing.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? But,
it's very weird. I would not call this a new normal at all.
Well, I hope it's not the new normal. But, I mean, you know, in the end, like, things, people don't disappear, you know. So whatever the world looks like afterwards, it's still going to have the same people in it.
Yeah.
You know?
And we're still going to have to deal with some people are good, some people are bad, and most are in between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what did you want to talk about today?
Well, I've always been a fan of your interviews since you started them. You have a new channel; it's really good. Sometimes it's given me some real chuckles when you are talking about things that I recalled myself. So I was thinking that instead of talking about, you know, the hardware and the weapons and the military aspect of it, I was thinking what would be really interesting is if we just talk about the everyday aspect of it, the mundane stuff, because to me that's really interesting. And you know, I think some people would get a giggle out of it, and you know, it might help people to understand that up there in the Bundes, it's you know, these are just people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's been a problem that I've had describing this is they want to think that if they're in space, they're monsters, and they're not.
Space Nazis.
Yeah, they're just people.
Yeah. And they're like there's heaps of different ethnicities that I've come across up there, and they don't rate a person based on their appearance at all. It's based on what you can do. You know, your quality as a human being. I think that early 20th century racism stuff just doesn't serve you up there. When the difference between you, say, a white person and an African is very minimal compared to, say, you and, say, I don't know, like a Zeta or something, you know, so.
or an alpha jack.
or an alpha jack, yes.
That's 2 to 3 times your height and can step into your mind.
Yeah, and I mean, all of these things are just bodies we're wearing, you know. It doesn't, you know, it in no way defines the type of person you are on a soul level. So judging a person based on the color or shape of their body is just a bit ridiculous, really.
Yeah, I agree. Although I have noticed that most of the people who come to me wanting counseling for having been in these programs are from certain ethnicities. Now, that may be just that my material is only available in, what is it, English, German, and Russian. So those are the only people hearing it. So.
Well, my understanding is that the foreign souls of certain backgrounds require certain DNA, have certain DNA requirements so that the soul attachment points on the body are reasonably well attuned to the different, the soul's adaptation to a different type of body. So, for example, the soul attachment points on a Draco are very different to those of a human, much larger with much greater capacity for data transfer through those points. What's on a human, they're in different places on the body and they're somewhat smaller. So in order for, say, a soul which is adapted to being attached to a Draco body, the soul will struggle being attached to a human body and have sensory issues and, you know, struggle quite a bit. So it helps if the body that a foreign soul attaches to is hybridized with the people that the soul is used to being.
Yeah, I was led to that understanding that if you have ET DNA, that you are more likely to have a soul from that background, simply because they can attach to it. And when that child comes up for ensoulment, that those particular beings step up because they can't just enter anyone. And for some reason, some of them want to be here.
Yes, I think that's a good question. Why?
Why do they want to be here? I mean,
yeah.
After being in the space programs, coming back here, it feels chaotic. It feels illogical. It feels controlled through the emotions rather than anything rational.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to go. Well, I was Black Sun in Nacht Waffen. Not in the altar with you, but my other altars who have been Nacht Waffen, I was Black Sun. So I was this logical, empowered, psi ability person who had responsibilities based on those abilities, and then to come back from that to being female in America and being in the class, well, my family affectionately called it poor white trash. So, yeah, to go from being a valued member of the crew to being someone that has no value to speak of in my own home culture is a big shock to your system, especially when you're going back and forth between them, because I was still being taken for duty up until, well, I had one last week, but it wasn't a big one. The last big one I had was in June. So when you still have alters out in space and you're getting bleed over because they're on the same timeline and the same time frame, because, well, you're bilocated, and so you're getting bleed over from the other half of you bilocated elsewhere. And so I don't know about you, but looking in the mirror is a big shock, because Nacht Waffen keeps me at 25 and thin and pretty, and I look in the mirror and go, what the hell happened?
It is a bit of a head spin. You know, I mean, I'm used to it now. The differences in appearance between up there and down here.
It gets worse as you get older.
And
here. I'm going to be 65 next month. And I'll let you tell them how old you are.
Old enough to know better and young enough to still be stupid about it.
Oh my. I'm still that, and I know I'm older than you are.
I remember after, when I turned 18, that's when I did what I call my long stint. I don't really know how long I was away for, but it seemed like a lifetime. And when I woke up the next morning, like I was a different person, very different person. And I remember for the months after I came back from that, I remember like I was completely lost. And people around me just seemed to be so emotional and out of control and irrational. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I just didn't notice that before, and now I do. And I remember just feeling like all I wanted was for someone to tell me what to do, because like I just like I felt
you were so used to taking orders in space.
Yeah, getting somebody saying like, okay, this is your goal, this is your mission. Here are your parameters, and this is your objective. Like, go to it. And then all of a sudden, I was like a free agent.
Yeah.
And had, nobody was telling me what to do, and I was lost.
Yeah,
at one point,
that happen.
At one point, I considered like checking myself into a mental institution, because I just wanted some sort of structure in my life, and and then I had a chat to my doctor about it. He said that's not why you go into a mental institution.
While I was remembering the memory and sorting through the pile and dealing with ongoing other dimensional interactions. I reached a
Hmm.
point in 2015 that, before I was public, that I considered going into a mental institution. And
Hmm.
Luke talked me out of it. He said, "Are you a danger to others?" And I go, "Nope." "Are you a danger to yourself?" And I go, "Nope." He says, "Then you don't need to be in a mental institution."
Yeah, that's pretty much what my doc said. I did get diagnosed with PTSD though, and they were um, my doctor at the time. Well, he referred me to a psychologist at university, so I went to one of the free psychologists for the students, and she almost immediately like went down that path. So I suspect maybe that they she was aware of that maybe on some level, but anyway,
Okay.
and so she diagnosed me with PTSD at the time, and was asking questions like, do you remember how you got PTSD? Do you remember anything? Do you maybe we should do a regression hypnosis to see if you
Ooh,
remember anything? She
she
was
was
really
she
probing
was
hard.
she was really good.
Mm.
The
And
one that I went to just wanted to fill me full of pills.
Um, and I remember that like there was the day before. Was it the day before? It was in the days before I did my long stint.
Hmm.
There was a military recruitment stand for officers at the front of my faculty, and I remember going up to that and being interested. And then when I came back, the days after that, that stand was back again. And I went to go walk up to it, and something inside of me just went like, "No, you won't be doing that." Um, I suspect they don't want us to go serve in the regular military.
That's been a common theme through a lot of the people that I have counseled, is that they wanted to serve in the military and for some reason were blocked. Either
Mm,
an internal voice saying, "Don't do this," or the military wouldn't accept them. Now,
mm,
there is also a group of people who have served in the military first before they were ever taken. And I think their service is actually related to their military service.
mm. Well, I know that they didn't recruit me at that point in time. They
Okay.
like I went to Space Academy in Huntsville, Alabama, and
And how
a
did that
program.
happen? Because you're not American.
No, um, I just got it in my head to make it happen, and it did seem very easy to make it happen. Like I was expecting there to be more challenges in making it happen, but suddenly the funds were there for me to go, and everything fell straight into place. It just happened. I suspect it would have happened whether I'd actually chased after it or not.
Yeah, that's
And for some reason, they had to get me there a week before the program started. So basically, I was stuck at the accommodation there for a week,
hmm.
and it was very strange because when I got there, it was late, very late, and I'd been awake for about 48 hours straight or so. So
Right?
they checked me into their accommodation, and pretty much I hit the sack. I zonked out.
Hmm.
Um, I woke up to them waking me up at some point, and they told me I'd been asleep a long time, and that they were concerned. And then they said, well, you've got to get up anyway. We're going for a trip. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I got my stuff ready. I was only 14, by the way, this time, biological age. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was the middle of the night, and the woman who woke me up was the basically the night duty staff, and she told me that her boyfriend was the duty officer at the Redstone military arsenal, and that we were going to go for a trip there. All of this happened without my parents' permission or anything, which was odd because for the rest of my time there, they were very serious about getting parental permission for doing anything. So she said, get dressed, have a shower, get dressed, I'll meet you back here in 45 minutes. So I did that. We got into a car, and they drove me to the Redstone military arsenal. And there were flight training simulators for pilots. And they said, the military there said, I think they were Air Force, said that they were going to, they wanted to see how good I was. So they said, here, these are just like big computer games. Just jump on one of these suckers and we'll put you through a scenario. And I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So I jumped into the simulator. And I remember the flight that they put me on was a aircraft carrier, takeoff from an aircraft carrier, and I had to go take out a target and come back. Oh. And at the time I didn't realize it, but the officer, the duty officer was up in the control room, and I could see him cackling and laughing and stuff, And I thought, oh wow, he must be having as much fun as I was. I was very innocent back then. And so I flew the mission. Didn't think that I'd ever actually. I've never flown a military fighter jet before, but I seemed to know how to do it fine. So that was interesting. Yeah. And I took off from the aircraft carrier, and I went and found the target and took it out, and then. There were some other secondaries on the way, so I dealt with them. And then an alarm went off, and the controller of the simulation said over the headset that, like, you're almost out of fuel, you better get back. And I was like, oh, okay. So I turned around and I head back to the aircraft carrier, and I almost landed successfully. I clipped I came in too low, and I clipped my undercarriage, and I skidded over the deck of the aircraft carrier, and that was the end of the simulation. And so I thought that I'd done very poorly because I crashed trying to land on the aircraft carrier. Yeah. And I got out, and I was like, oh well, that was fun, but and then I realized that the people in the room were all kind of a bit shocked. And I was like, what? They said it normally takes a person a lot of training to be able to do that. And so I was like, oh, okay. And they did a lot of other stuff while I was there that I can remember.
What did you
I
tell
can't remember
them?
all of it.
What did you tell them, that it was beginner's luck?
I just thought, like, for many years after that, I was of the opinion that flying US military fighter craft must be really easy. So when I ran into like pilots, like Air Force pilots or whatever, I just give them shit about how easy it is to do their job,
And they would get angry, of course.
Yeah, pretty much. They're like, what would you know? And I'm like, oh, I've flown the simulators. It's, this is when I was young and not very, and very blunt,
I'm old and can still be blunt, but it's okay. I mean, you've known me a while. You know this to be the truth.
It is the truth. And like, I only say that if they were, if the pilots were egotistical, I don't like ego, it's in general,
Yeah, I know.
And so when people come to me and they try to, to use the term piss testosterone everywhere, I like to take them down a notch. You know?
I've noticed that. Yeah, it can be fun to watch.
Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, so I was just of the opinion that flying these craft was easy. And then in my 30s, I watched a documentary about the training and all that sort of stuff, and I thought to myself, you know, well, it's not that easy, you know. And then I started thinking about it, and I realized that there was a lot of time that passed while I was there at the arsenal, at the base there, that I don't remember. I had a sense of time passing, but like it's just there's nothing there. And then after a long period, they took me back to the Space Academy, and you know, I completed the training there. But after I came back, you know, I started just being like remembering stuff.
Did you?
Like you know, the layout of Nacht Waffen vessels, and you know, the ranking system, and you know, identifying all the badges and the ranks, and you had to have this all memorized. And it was only later that I realized that I think that I went through officer training college. I don't know whether it happened at Huntsville or whether or not they just picked me up from there. But it was later that I found out that the Redstone Military Arsenal was Warner von Braun's base of operations. That's where his headquarters was.
Well, I was waiting for you to identify it.
And while I was there, like I did have lectures from the German rocket scientists from Mundane. So you know, like I suspect that was when things started getting serious. You know,
Mundane had some really serious people there. They had admitted, well, von Braun had admitted to that they had ET assistance at Peenemünde.
That's right.
So
I mean, it's my understanding is amongst those scientists, it's no secret. So
yeah, it's no secret from the German side. It's just been hidden from the American side. And I'm pretty sure from feedback I've gotten because of some of my podcasts being translated into Russian, the Russians are much more open about it than the Americans are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you start talking about it in Russia, it's an interesting intellectual subject for them. If you talk about it here in Western culture, we've had what, like 70 years of propaganda, of you know, if you're interested in that subject, then there must be something wrong with you.
Yeah.
You know. So they try to paint the Russian scientists who investigate and deal with those subjects as, you know, oh well, they're not credible. They're not you know, they're not real scientists. They're just crazy Russian scientists.
Well, you can even see that in some of the sci-fi that came out of America in that time frame.
Oh yeah. If you're a scientist, a physicist with like a European background, then you're like the crazy, you know, like, you know, manufacturers of doomsday weapons and everything, you know, you know, they're lunatics, you know.
Well, I think right now we've got crazy American scientists and rich folks that are working on a crazy doomsday vaccine. So I don't think that they have much credibility in their insults anymore. But
I think it's down to who manufactures a vaccine as to how good it actually is, and whether or not it's for the benefit of the person who takes it. you know.
I've seen a lot of damage done from them, and the damage gets worse the more vaccines people take. And it got incredibly worse in the 80s when they started adding aluminum to them.
But the the medical industry in the United States, although advanced, is not often for the benefit of the patient. That is
Agreed.
my experience.
Agreed.
In other countries,
it's for
particularly,
making money.
yes, in countries that have socialized medicine, the government controls the medical technology, and the government is determined to make people as not sick as fast as possible to save money. That's their goal.
Their goal is
it
to get you off medical care as soon as possible, but I've seen abuses of that as well. There was something out of the United Kingdom that was called the Liverpool Protocol that was completely horrid. It was basically, you could take a healthy person, declare them to be ill, irremediably ill, and they would be dead 5 days later.
Wow.
And that was used to thin the numbers on old age pensions.
Oh, that's a real shame.
So that is now discredited, but a decade ago that was in full swing. So socialized is not always better.
It isn't. It's only as good as the government.
Exactly. And
a corrupt government does corrupt.
One thing I have learned being American is you can never trust the government.
But
they have been lying to us my entire lifetime.
Yeah. Well, it's they're always going to lie on some level. It's the nature of government, I suppose.
Yeah.
But we've gotten off topic. We're going to discuss. We're going to discuss everyday life in das Bundes.
Yes.
So.
Well, I'm at a disadvantage because I was never a civilian in das Bundes. My experience is completely in the military. So I'll let you talk about the civilian life.
Okay. My experience is that there's a very high quality of life. Now, it could well be that my experience of their civilian life is amongst the very fortunate, obviously, because, I mean, the life that Tony Rodriguez describes is very different, and I was never exposed to that in a outside of work, so to speak. But what I recall, I remember that almost all of the citizenry had these robots that essentially acted like PAs, a cross between a PA and a security guard.
What's a PA?
You know, a personal assistant.
Okay.
You know, they would basically follow you around and be a servant, essentially. We now understand that these robots actually had a small piece of human brain grafted into them.
Yeah.
The reasoning for that, my understanding is that the Galactic Authority, whatever you want to call it, prohibits artificial intelligence. But by grafting a small piece of human brain onto it, it's not artificial intelligence. It's human intelligence. So they use that loophole, but we were not aware of it. And it's entirely possible that a lot of the people who were manufacturing those robots were not aware of the fact that that piece of human brain dragged a piece of your human soul with it to the robot. So none of us thought that these were anything other than like fancy robotics. So I do know that towards the end of my stint, my long stint, they had the most sought after, most expensive robots you could get were ones that essentially appeared flesh on the outside. So it looked like people, very beautiful people. You know, if you were a high level person, very wealthy, then you might have 3 or 5 of these like flesh robots hovering around you. And if you were a straight man, then chances are these robots were probably going to be very good looking women, and vice versa for women. You know,
were they actually flesh or were they a plastic?
they were. My understanding is they were flesh.
Okay.
So my understanding is what they did is that they used the. We were told they had the robot brain, but they would essentially clone a human body, minus the central nervous system, and basically engineer it with the robot brain, so that, you know, they acted exactly like the rest of the robots did, but they were like, you know, warm and fleshy.
And the population was okay with this?
Well, they saw them as just like really advanced high-tech robots, and the population up there is very, you know, technology is a source of pride. It's like, you know, look what we've got now. You know, our city has this amazing new technology, and we all walk around with our new super high-tech robots. You know, and it wasn't considered inhumane or cruel or anything, because they were considered to be just flesh bodies. They were not. They never had a person in them. They were just a robot brain operating a body. They weren't 100% flesh. I mean, like the skeleton. My understanding is the skeleton had been modified as well to make them a lot tougher, so they could move at much higher speeds and you know, if needs be, save the person that they were supposed to be looking after from a bad situation. You know, but that's the robots. I remember they were the intelligence on the robots. You know, we were always amazed by how remarkably intelligent they were. You know, and many people had discussions about, you know, whether or not these robots had souls or not. You know. But we didn't realize that they had grafted human brain in them to make them so that they could get through that loophole.
Yeah.
People live individual lives up there, as in like each and every adult citizen had their own dwelling, their own house. Marriage, it existed, but it was a contract between a man and a woman to agree that they are going to operate together for a certain defined period of time, during which they're going to raise children. It's not. It doesn't have the same feel to it that it does down here. But it was more of a contractual agreement that you were going to obligate yourself to ensure that your children were brought up in an appropriate way.
So there was no emotional contract?
Well, people get married because, you know, they fall in love and that sort of stuff. But the marriage contract had no emotional thing to it. It was like, you know, it was what you did if you decided you were going to have children. Okay. And you didn't just, if you fell pregnant accidentally, my understanding is that wasn't allowed to happen. So my understanding is that the women had a type of birth control that meant they didn't menstruate or anything like that. They never, that never happened. Their hormonal levels were kept at a particular, well, basically my understanding were frozen at a particular point in their cycle. And it was very unusual for a woman to fall pregnant. But of course, mistakes happen, and if she did fall pregnant, it was apparently a very easy process to remove the pregnancy.
Well,
So there were almost no.
While I was in Nacht Waffen,
Mhm.
the military side, there were a couple of times that I became pregnant, and they would just dump me into the regen tank to remove it. Like
Yes.
it never happened.
And it's a very safe procedure. So it was very unusual to happen, but it did happen, and there was a very safe and easy way to remove it. When people decided to reproduce, it was it's with great consideration. It's you choose when you, yes, it's very intentional. And my understanding is that a great deal of genetic checks are done, to ensure that that you'll be a good match with the person that you'd like to have children with. And this is a very good idea because they don't want to. Number one, that the population of the citizenry up there is not, it wasn't massive. And you don't want to have.
That doesn't match with what I remember. I remember 1,000 colonies with 1 billion people each.
It might be that the colonies were smaller. I mean, I'm just talking about where I've been to.
Oh, okay.
The populations were, the populations were relatively small. As in, I'm not talking like hundreds of people. I'm talking about like hundreds of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to ensure that interbreeding didn't happen, that the offspring was as genetically healthy as physically possible.
And no ET interbreed, no hybridization.
I don't think that they had any real racial concerns, unless there was a concern that such an interbreeding would cause problems. So, humans are basically a mutt of different star nations, an absolute mess of DNA material. And so, it's important to make sure that the mess that you have for the rest of your life is the best mess you could hope for the rest of your life. Because, up there, you're not specifically stuck with the DNA, but it's better if if the one that you've got to begin with is a good body, So,
that always helps.
And I suspect also that they're aware of the fact that that if you ensure that a body has particular genetic traits, that it's more likely to pick up an ancient soul, And my understanding is the baby souls that we get here on Earth, wherever they come from, it seems to be from the vicinity of Earth. Mm-hmm. So, out there amongst the stars, if a child is born, chances are the soul that it picks up is going to be an ancient one. So, which, it definitely doesn't hurt a population for its souls to be primarily ancient ones.
That's true. They tend to be smarter and less violent.
Yeah, well, they're more aware of their surroundings. They're able to be empathic. They're and telepathic. They come with a world of a massive history of previous experience, and they also tend not to be assholes.
The baby souls on Earth. This is something that is described in Nacht Waffen, that Earth is considered to be a baby soul nursery, a place where it is safe for baby souls to learn the basics of interaction with each other and to learn why certain behaviors are wrong.
Yeah, and they also can't escape into the wider community.
Yeah.
So it's safe for everybody else as well.
And my understanding was that a soul has to be 52% service to others to leave Earth. So that makes the ones out there generally more advanced than most here on Earth. Although the ETs have figured out that they can dump criminals and dissidents and folks who cause social issues here.
Oh yeah, well that was half of the problem with the planet. My understanding is that it's the souls that are trapped here are these reject ones.
Well, they're not all rejects. Some of them are.
No.
Some of them are here because they were deposed royals. Some of them are here because they were justice seekers.
Yeah, what I mean by reject is I mean like ones that they have decided that they don't want in reincarnating back into their society.
Yeah.
So whether or not they be people who are political activists or artists that they didn't like, or you know, mass murderers, you know, they bring them here and they execute them, and then their souls get, you know, sucked into the soul recycling machinery here, and you know.
And then they're here until they are 52% service to others, and then they get to leave.
Yeah. Or they get identified by a visiting star nation, and they decide when that person dies that they would like that person to be amongst their own population. So, you know, then they pick them up at that point too. It's funny, you know, it's sort of like when you go from a theological perspective, a lot of the religions kind of have it right. I mean, you know, if you a good person here, then, you know, you may get to go into the sky and live a much better life.
That's true.
But the essence of it is accurate.
The majority of us stay and recycle.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if, like, when this is over, I'm going to wake up in a chair somewhere with some sort of VR headset on, and only an hour is going to have passed, and I'm going to check my clock and go, oh, I've still got another hour before dinner. Maybe I've got time for another lifetime. I'm hoping that I'm going to leave a Post-it note stuck to my forehead that says, "Don't do it." You know?
Please don't do it.
It was not fun. Don't do it. You know. But then again, I was like, apparently, you know, one of the goals of being here is learning to let go. You know, and you don't. You know, you only keep coming back here if you feel that you need to have more, to not let go. You think to yourself, you know what, I'm going to have another go at being here. You know, I'm going to do it better. I know better this time, you know. And I think that's, you know, you make that decision yourself.
Well, I didn't think I had agreed to this lifetime because it was so bizarre and so many horrible things had happened. And so my higher self gave me a picture of my past life self, my most recent one, reading this thick book that was the contract for this incarnation. And I was a man past life, and he sits there and he says, well, it's impossible. I'll be crazy by the end. But it has to be done. and better me than someone who doesn't know anything about this world. And then he pulls out a pen and signs it, and I'm like, oh.
You gone stuffed up again, Penny.
Yeah, so it's like, okay. And I'm going to be 65 next month, and there are days that I think I'm completely insane, and there are days that everybody who comments on my YouTube or Facebook basically implies that I'm crazy and or angry all the time. And I'm just like, okay.
It's part of the course.
So it will be what it's going to be. I did not get a peek at what was in the book, so I'm as out there. I have no idea what's next. But
that's half of the fun, isn't it?
The last decade has been a hell of a roller coaster ride. So
the last year has been a hell of a roller coaster ride.
Actually,
I think
for me, the last year has been almost no change at all.
Yes, but you're one of those introverted people that were doing this all along anyway.
That's true. I've been physically disabled for a solid decade. I've been on Social Security disability that long, and I have taken some sort of a trip every year for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this year my trip was to Alaska, paid for by Eric Hecker, who...
That would have been very exciting. I'm very jealous.
That was awesome, especially when he and his lady took Lou and I to see glaciers. I had never seen one up close and personal before.
They're majestic. I landed on one once. The little crevasses right up the top, where it's apparently safe. And you got these little.
On it. I was downstream from it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we went from, we were at the base of it, and then we decided we were going to go land up on the top of one, and I was told it's completely safe. There's just snow, and so we landed up there, and then as I was walking along the snow, I started noticing these little fishes that seem to go down a ways, and I'm like, is this dangerous? Like these fishes? And they said, oh no, like they go down a ways, but they're only an inch or so wide. And I'm like, I'm gonna go back to the craft now.
Yeah, I seem to recall we had experiences with something similar while we were out there. So we were on the same ship together for 15 years, guys. We had lots of bizarro experiences.
Yeah, it's just rats. She was a good little vessel. She was one of the latest technology craft that we had access to. Not typical gravitic craft.
I thought we stole her from the guy that was the engineer that was always fixing it. I thought that was why he was so angry all the time. Was we stole his ship.
Well, when I got her commission, I was advised that he came with the ship, and there wasn't anything they could do about that. But he was a fine engineer and knew what he was doing. And
and he did. And for the audience, he looked like an Ewok, and he was covered with fur that you had no idea what was under it.
No. I didn't want to know, and it stunk. So
we assumed he was male because that was his general attitude, and he was mildly telepathic with humans, and he was angry as hell all the time.
He was a moody, old, grumpy asshole. That's really my opinion. I don't know. Maybe I don't recall stealing the vessel from him. I recall it being assigned to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but maybe it was stolen from him. Maybe that was why he was just so angry and moody. But, all I know is he wasn't interested in conversation or anything like that, and essentially just wanted to be left alone. So,
I know we
um,
had a crew of about a dozen, and 4 of us were humans, but I
yeah,
can't remember the mix.
it was an interesting experience.
And
I don't.
what we were doing, as I recall, was we were traveling through Das Bundes space and checking in on bases, colonies, outposts, mining planets, and gathering intel for Nacht Waffen, the military, so that they would have some idea of what was going on in their territory. So we were basically narcs. And we came through and pretended to be smugglers. And I don't know how we got it, but we had a hold that was full of Johnny Walker Red. And
I remember we never ran out of it. That's for
no,
certain.
we never ran out of Johnny Walker Red. And we would go and we would take a bottle of it with us to the local bar wherever we landed, and said,
It made you popular.
"Oh yeah," and I mean, I may be a fat old woman now, but the age 25 I was kept while I was in SSP. I didn't look too bad, and I would go in and I would be just civilian and ask the bartender, "Can I talk to your owner? Your bar owner," and make a deal to sell him a bottle or a case of the whiskey, which was contraband because in Das Bundes they were allowed beer and vodka. So
Plus, it was manufactured on Earth too.
So American whiskey was contraband, and I mean, it was a major big deal. And I would go in, and once the deal was made, I owned that bar owner. And
they were pretty happy with it.
Usually they were absolutely tickled because it meant I would come back and restock them. But in exchange, I needed information. And if they gave me a hard time, Herr Major is 6'4" and fills the door. And they didn't know that I was the mean one. So
yeah, you're way meaner than I was.
we had a hijacking attempt once on our little ship, Der Spatz, which translates to the Sparrow. So it was considered to be a tiny, almost a family yacht. This was the size ship we were dealing with. It was this little thing. We supposedly didn't have weapons, but of course we did. And Herr Major walked into our cockpit / bridge. It was too small to really be a bridge, but we called it that. And it was
the bridge.
And he found one of his buddies trying to take over the ship. And so we
had docked with him. He was another officer that I was familiar with. I can't quite remember how I was familiar with him. Maybe we worked together at some point, but I remember that we were familiar. So, it was like old buddies.
Yeah,
and
like I
there
said,
was
your buddy.
yeah,
And
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 there,
you started fighting with him in the bridge, which was a very
yeah,
tiny place, about like an apartment-sized kitchen. I mean, tiny.
yeah,
And so
that's
the
about
two
right.
of them were in there, and Herr Major is not a small person. And so they were fighting, physical fighting, unarmed, both of them. And this guy had crewmen that were trying to come in and assist him. And so here I am. I've got the door. And I had a laser blade that whenever it's off, it's just a handle and it's silver colored. You hit the button and you've got a 1/2 meter long red laser blade of the type like you would expect from Star Wars. And if you make a cut, it cauterizes it at the same time. And I was fighting off this invading crew. And because I'm telepathic, I shot out to our crew to stay in their rooms, because anything that was coming down that hallway was going to be dead. And afterwards, I don't know if any of you guys have been in a battle situation, but afterwards you're like strung out on adrenaline,
Yeah,
and you're cold and shaky, and I get hysterical afterwards. And so I just went into my own cabin and did a shower and got everything off of me from killing these people. And the ETs on our crew were terrified of me after that. It was like they had never seen a human go primal like that.
it was a rough day, that one.
It was a rough day all around. You ended up killing the man that had been your friend. So it was just really a bad day for all of us. And then we had to take the bodies and put them in stasis so they wouldn't stink up the ship, and then go back to our home base and file reports and turn the bodies over to High Command, Oberkommando, and it was a really big deal.
That affected me. After I came back from that tour, that was a bad way to end that tour.
That was you here on Earth had bleed over from that at the time that it happened, and so did I. It was like I was there. So I'm not telling this from the perspective of I had an alter who was there. It was I was piggybacking the alter doing this. So I had a front row seat to this carnage. So
yeah. I mean, you hear a lot of super soldiers saying that it's like, oh, like that they have a memory or whatnot, but man, like, I don't know about them, but when I experience these things, like, I'm there. It's not a if but maybe sort of thing. Like, you're there.
You're there.
It's
you're
as
there.
real as real can be.
You're there. You're there. And after I blew up a factory because I was there, they made it where I cannot affect the action anymore. I'm not sure what they did to the interface, but I'm there piggybacking. I can see, hear, feel everything, but not affect the action. And that is the most frustrating, you know, because you can see it going down. You can feel it going down. You're there witnessing it. And you know it's a part of you that is doing this. And that's the altar that I always called Starbuck. You called her Valky. And I called her that because she had the same kind of personality like Starbuck on Battlestar Galactica. That
yeah, she was a bit rough.
it was eat, drink, and be merry, have fun because tomorrow we're gonna die.
Oh, you make her sound like she was a party animal, but she was a deadly serious woman. Is a deadly serious woman. You know, she was a pants wearing, boot wearing, leather jackety, like feet up on the bloody console all the time.
You did yell at me a lot for that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you could damage the console. You know, you're not supposed to do that. Not that, you know. I mean, hell, if me rumbling with that idiot in the bridge isn't going to break anything, and you know, probably your feet isn't either. But it's not regulation, and we can all get in trouble for you doing it. So, you know.
But we were supposed to be. We were supposed to be contraband and smugglers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you played that role better than I did.
I was in character.
I remember, even in my real life, you know, I just like nobody believes that I'm like what do they call it? One of the criminal element. Just can't pull it off.
Nobody would think I was criminal element either.
Yeah.
On Earth.
I'm up there. You did it. You fit in really well with the smugglers and you know. But I just, from recollection, I just used to basically let you have at it, because I just could not pull it off.
Well, you made a good backup. But for the audience, my Earth altar, Penny, has been a church mouse up until 2013, when my memories were activated and with the code word, what faith I had completely disappeared overnight. So that was a complete total shock to my entire family. And I had been a Christian religious fanatic before then. And I have lightened up tremendously since. And people who knew me before have told me that I have changed too much, too fast for them to keep up. And so they dropped me. I have no real world friends because I changed so much since 2013. And you get most of your adult friends from your workplace, and I'm disabled. So
it always surprised me because you went through the schooling system up there like I did. And one of the things, you know, they do religious education up there, but it's not religious education from the point of that Jesus came down and healed people or whatever. It's religious education like, you know, this is the nature of religion. This is the reason why terrestrial humans are religious. This is their issues with it. This is, you know, this is the history of the reality, and this is the nature of the human brain and the cognitive science behind it. So by the time you're ready to go to college, like my my outlook on religion by the time I was 13, 14 was that, like, would have been classified as a militant atheist, you know.
Okay. The difference is my family was part of a conservative, fundamentalist, religious cult. And my father was also my pastor. This was part of the control system. If you have someone who their first time through in space is basically a female Darth Vader, that's a good description for the folks who have never interacted with us, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right, yeah.
Okay,
I'll pay that.
I had ingested black goo. I was a navigator, so I would take the entire ship into hyperspace and bring them back. And I had psi abilities where that if we were sent to attack a planet that had an EM shield around it, electromagnetic shielding, will stop electronics in certain types of weapons. And I was able to guide a bomb through that shielding to destroy the planet. Okay, I've done some nasty things in Nacht Waffen. And you have that kind of person, and you're turning her back into a 4-year-old in 1959.
It's a lot to squeeze into a 4-year-old mind.
What are you going to do with that kid to make her behave? You're going to make sure she's in a mind control situation. And what's a better mind control situation in 1959 than putting her into a religious cult? With programming to accept it.
Mind you, I mean, their knowledge of how to deal with us back then was not, they were a lot rougher and a lot less
oh yeah, they were
knowledgeable about it.
They were a lot rougher. My group that went through Langley, 80% of us died the first year. So by 1960, 80% of us were dead. And when I was contacted, what was it, 3 years ago we talked about this? 2 years ago? When I was contacted by a DOD agent, she informed me that I was the last surviving member of the class of Langley of 1964. Meaning
sounds prestigious.
Yeah, it means that they want me dead because I'm the last one that can speak for the whole group. Yes, they did this shit to us. Yes, I'm still alive. Yes, I'm talking.
The ironic bit is that the only people who are going to listen to us and be able to comprehend what we're saying and take it in are those people who are probably involved in the programs.
This is true.
The rest of the general population, as soon as they try to take this in, they're just going to they're going to lose it straight away from their mind.
They're going to say that we are playing a role-playing game, and we're not.
Although we're crazy, they'll have their usual programmed response. Oh, they're crazy.
What is it I've been told? I've been told in the last week, that's a reach. That was just talking about that there were programs.
I don't know why you try to talk about. Well, I don't know why, like, you know, this, like your show, people who are going to watch it are people who are exploring the concept for themselves, you know?
Well, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that are listening.
Absolutely. But the thing is that talking to...
I'm not meaning to brag, but one of my shows had 18,000 live listeners.
Hmm.
We have an
But
audience.
the people who, like, the general population that you might come across in the street, are simply not capable of coping with the concept. It serves absolutely no purpose to try and talk to them about any of this.
I'm,
Even if for a moment they might, you know, think that you actually have a point, that you might be right, within an hour or so, they'll have forgotten, they'll know that they came across a crazy woman or a crazy man who said something really crazy about aliens or, I don't know, some shit. And then that'll be it. And probably 12 months later, they won't even recall that the interaction ever happened. You know?
the issue at hand is to get these programs to only work with consenting adults.
Mm.
And that is my goal. And it only takes 5% of the population to understand the issue for it to become open to the gestalt, the higher consciousness of the species.
Mm-hmm.
Once we reach that 5%, then we can make the changes that we need to make. And the rest will understand why. We are about halfway there, a little bit more than halfway. So the effort is worth the doing.
It is, but talking to like randoms essentially is like, it's not going to achieve anything.
Well, these are not randoms exactly. These are people. I share the adverts for my radio show into groups on Facebook where the admins have told me I'm welcome.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not talking about randoms as in like people watching a show. People who are watching your show are watching it because they're open to the concept, that they're interested, they're ready for it. I'm talking about, you know, just random people on the street.
I don't talk about it to random people on the street. I'm first of all, I'm not out on the street. If I'm out of my house, apartment, I'm going to a store or I'm going to a doctor's office. I'm not just randomly out there.
No, I don't mean on the street. I like literally, I mean like, you know, like the general public.
My Facebook wall is private. I do share some things public, but my Facebook wall itself is private. It's friends and family only. My group where I interact with the people that I counsel or are in veteran status, that's private. You can't even find it through a search. It's invitation only. And the other groups that I admin belong to other people. And basically I go in and check who's applied for membership, make sure they're real people and not bots. And you know, then I share everybody's interviews, you know, in the community.
And you know, I believe that you and others who are doing similar things to raise awareness of the situation, yourself, Tony Rodriguez, you know, you're doing a fantastic job, and I think you're and Ileana, I think you're all very brave, and I think there's an awful lot of respect goes to you guys, because you know the backlash from the community is always great. And I simply don't have the time or the energy or the interest in arguing with people who are struggling with reality.
Most humans that I've encountered are struggling with Well, actually, they're not even struggling. They have accepted the consensus view of reality that 3D is all there is, that they are to hold a job, have a house, if they're married and have kids, to make sure that those people are taken care of, to pay their bills, to pay their taxes, keep their car running, and mow their lawn once a week. That's what life is in the United States. And
But it's easier to just follow that. It takes no effort.
most of them might watch the news once a week. They really don't care. And it's a very simple life, but they're in a lot of stress trying to make sure all the bills are paid because they've been buying everything that the neighbors have. So they've got themselves deeply into debt, buying things they don't like, they don't need, just because the neighbor has them.
That's the program.
That's the basic program. And those people are never, ever, ever going to care that I was kidnapped when I was 4 years old and taken to Langley and then tossed into space. I mean, seriously, those people are never going to care. And no, I don't aim at them. I'm aiming at the people who listen to my show, the people who follow my YouTube channel, the people who hunt me down on Facebook after hearing interviews on YouTube or my show. And so I'm already talking to people who have interacted with me in some capacity. And it's not as small a group as people think. One of my interviews with James Rink has 75,000 views.
Whoa.
So I'm not the nobody that people have been assuming for a while. Just because I'm not on the majors, I've not been on Coast to Coast, I've not been on Fade to Black, I've not been on Gaia. So
you're not touting the regular, accepted line, so.
No, I'm saying that Draco are not necessarily evil, that the Germans are just people, they're not Nazis, and that the factions in space are taking World War II back into space irrationally. So, I'm not saying the standard thing that Pleiadian good, Draco evil. No, it's a hell of a lot more complex than that.
But that's the narrative they're trying to push, though.
It is, obviously. That's exactly the narrative they're trying to push. And I'm saying, well, gee, the Pleiadians, when I was in Nacht Waffen, Pleiadian meant it was classified and we weren't supposed to talk about it, because the Pleiades are a group of new stars with very few populated planets. There aren't any people there. So when they say Pleiadian, it's a lie. And when you look at the books that the classic UFO abductions were all written about, you find Hanabu ships, you find swastikas inside, you find folks inside that speak German, you find German uniforms, and you find an ET that's the navigator. Because
but they're Pleiadian.
Yeah, right.
And they're in Switzerland and Austria, and they're collecting pieces of furniture and pieces of valuable artifacts and whatnot, but they're collecting them to show their the other Pleiadians back home, because they come from Venus. Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
So
I thought it was hilarious from the beginning, but anyway.
Yeah, well, those of us who have served with the Germans know that when the Germans decide to visit Earth for whatever reason, they call themselves Pleiadians.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the books written about the actual encounters. You see German written all over it.
Yeah. I
And
don't know why it's like not questioned more, to be honest. Like
people are not even reading the books because, you know, Betty and Barney Hill, they talked about there were Germans, there was a Scotsman, and there was a Zeta. And all that anybody ever remembers is there was a Zeta. The Zeta was the navigator so that they could go through hyperspace without ending up at the wall.
hey, Penny. A Zeta, a Scotsman, and a German walk into a bar together.
Yeah.
Sorry. I can't tell that one in polite conversation. Never mind.
Probably
Let's move
not,
on.
no. No, because if they're going into a bar together, the German and the Scotsman are going to get drunk, and then they're going to apply cleaning products to the Zeta so the Zeta can get drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on the Zeta, but anyway, yeah.
If they're going into a bar, that's what they're there for. Yes, that's because some Zetas, there are like 5 planets and each has a different race on it. There is one particular version of Zeta that has a metabolism where they absorb nutrients through their skin and then they poop the excess waste back out on their skin and they stink to high heaven. Now, most ET races think humans smell bad, but Zeta, this particular form of Zeta stinks to humans. And we discovered that cleaning products would make them drunk by using them on them to reduce the stench.
Yeah.
So we did it for all the wrong reasons, but at the same time, when you're on a ship and your navigator is a Zeta, you can get to the point where the stink is so bad that you just simply cannot bear it another minute.
One of those ones, anyway.
Yeah, one of those ones. So there are lots of races out there. There are thousands of races just in our local part of the Sagittarius arm and Orion spur. So yes, this is where the Draco Empire is. And there are thousands, if not millions, of races just in the Draco Empire. And they are usually what they call a humanoid shape, which is a head, arms, legs, sometimes wings, sometimes a tail. This is the basic body shape for oxygen breathers. Now, if you're starting to talk about hydrogen breathers, they can look like anything. Yes?
Yes.
They can look like a cloud, they can look like a mist coming through, and still be a sentient life form. So you need to get over the idea that if it looks like you, it's good. If it doesn't look like you, it's bad. That's bullshit.
Nope. Plenty of bad people, humans, that look like us and are quite bad people. So it's got nothing to do with appearance. But the main reason why a lot of the ETs that people recall have the same human body layout, you know, a head, two arms, 2 legs, that sort of thing, is because Earth has a very special role in our local area of the galaxy as being a progenitor planet. So basically, Earth constantly spits out civilizations which become spacefaring constantly and almost at great regularity. And those species go back way off into the past. As a general rule, if it's got a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, it's probably got ancestry that's somehow involved with Earth or one of its other genetic shared planets. That's a panspermia thing that's neither here nor there. But anyway, related to us, there are a lot of species out there who are sentient, who are not terrestrial originated, and those do not have like the classic star pattern. Draco, for example, are the classic star pattern.
Yes, they are.
And I think that
in all of their forms. All 7 of their races have the classic star pattern.
And my understanding is that they evolved from an animal that's much like a turtle. So
the warriors did. The alphas are quite proud of descending from Siakar, which are dragons.
Of course.
Of course. And the Siakar admit to it. So they how was it? The Siakar that I interact with said, yes, they're our descendants. In just about that tone.
I mean, I remember there's military terminology that we use up there to describe what type of individual we're looking at, their body. And we use the term terrestrial, near terrestrial, mid-range terrestrial, distant terrestrial. And what that means is that the distance, it's not actually talking about how far that they reside from Earth, or that tends to coincide with it. It's more to do with how far from the terrestrial human mainstream genetics the individual appears to be. So what people would call a zeta is what we would refer to as a distant non-terrestrial human. So they're the hominid appearance. They are obviously quite some distance from the mainstream genetics of Earth, and that's how you describe them. What people call Pleiadians, Germans or whatever, we would call either terrestrial or near terrestrial humans. And that's the system that we use for describing these people. It doesn't actually tell you where they're from. It's a way of describing physically to another person what you're looking at.
Yeah. And humans on Earth need to understand they are not the only sentient race here.
Oh, no. It's not even our planet.
No. The folks in the Guardians that I interact with define sentience as you can look in a mirror and know it's you. Know it's your reflection. And that has nothing to do with whether you have opposable thumbs or have speech or telepathy or any of that. It has to do with a level of consciousness where that you can look in a mirror and know it's a reflection of yourself and not another being. And there are a tremendous number of species on Earth that can do that.
Large number.
Large number. And most of them are from here. And that number is actually going up lately because the general consciousness of the animal world is raising.
Cats talking, dogs stopping chasing cars. It's crazy.
Yeah. And that doesn't count the apes that are using sign language and pigs that are making what sounds like language. or whales or other Sentients, or, well, you guys call them Yowies. My country, we call them all sorts of things. Sasquatch usually. But, you know, there are beings here who have been here a long, long time that are sentient and more intelligent than humans. And yet we, as a species, have been killing them off, extincting them. And this is unacceptable, completely. We can't even get along with each other of our
things
own
are changing.
species.
Things are changing rapidly at the moment. You know, I think that the kids these days are being exposed to concepts and ideas and whatnot that completely changes how they're going to interact with non-terrestrial humans when they come across them.
Well,
you know,
I hope that's the case, because I'm seeing a lot of young people who are mistreating other sentient races on this world. And I'm hearing a lot of, for lack of a better term, xenophobic talk.
Fear.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Where I live. And I will admit, I live in bumfuck California. I guess.
BFE.
Huh?
BFE.
Bumfuck means backwards.
Oh, I know.
Backwards, redneck, conservative, low class. I live in a mountain area that most of California considers us to be hillbillies. And,
it's so pretty.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Or it would be if they'd stop burning it down. We're filming this in the middle of September, and the smoke is so thick that I can only see 2 blocks away. For the rest of the world, that's about a half a kilometer.
Is a block an actual specific measurement in America, or?
It sorta.
I assumed that a block was basically referring to street corners.
Okay, if you live in a place where it's a standard block, you have 8 to the mile.
Oh, okay. Is that like a league or a hogshead?
We are using archaic British measurements. Okay, these are the measurements that were developed in Europe over thousands of years, and some of them go all the way back to the Egyptian pharaohs. And no, they are not the metric system, but they work for us and have for thousands of years.
How many cubits to a mile?
A cubit is 18 inches, which is half of a yard.
Oh, okay.
And yes, I do keep all those things straight, and most of them I can actually translate into metric if I have to.
Sorry, I can't help but tease about.
Oh, I know. I don't
how many sticks to a yard?
I don't know how you function when you come here to visit. You know, unless your phone does measurement translations for you.
All I got to do is remember that 1.6 kilometers is a mile, and that a yard is about 90 centimeters. And yeah, I think that the mathematics that you guys do in the back of your head to convert fractions to other fractions looks like magic to me. But
Yeah, you're used to decimals, aren't you?
yeah, I mean, decimals is a lot simpler system. When
Decimals
they
are a
explain,
lot simpler system, but at the same time, we get a precision that you don't.
no, that's absolutely accurate. Yeah, you know. But it's fascinating listening to Americans talk to each other when they say, all you got to do is put screws in at 1/10 of a cubit from each other, and then you 2/18 of a whatever, and it's kind of like you just sit there
2/16.
going, oh, 1/8.
We
3/16. So I don't know.
our system is based on multiples of 2. An 18th is something irrelevant.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't even know that.
There is a
Sorry.
logic behind it. It's just not real obvious if you weren't raised with it.
Okay. I'll have to do a meme or something like that and say, like, when Americans do mathematics and they've got like their like slide rules and their fractions and stuff, and he goes, when foreigners watch Americans do mathematics and put a picture of Gandalf doing magic.
Well, I used to use a slide rule. That's what we used before we had calculators. And calculators were only available to outside of businesses about 1978. So you have to take into effect that the technology that you are used to is much newer than you think it is.
Yeah. I'm sorry for everybody listening. I like to tease Penny about when she starts going into her archaic measurements, and up there in Nacht Waffen, like it's also a bit of a running joke for everybody up there when they have to deal with when you deal with the French or the English or almost everyone else in the world, they're using metrics. But when you deal with Americans, they start dealing with hogs heads and leagues and God knows what other arbitrary measurements they can come up with. That'll be
a league is a measurement in water, nothing else.
I know that. I'm just teasing.
Yeah. Well, when
sorry, I have ultimate respect for Americans. Sorry, it's a lot of love. It's just a running joke we have.
Yeah.
Up there. I mean, once we were up there for like decades together. Everybody's just metric.
Mm-hmm. But everybody up there is metric and base 60,
yeah.
not base 10. So there's a lot more numbers.
There are a lot of Americans up there, but Penny's our token one on the spouts. So, everybody is constantly giving her shit about that.
Yeah.
And the thing is that although she's so far removed from being American up there, though, but it's kind of like somebody who was born like in a foreign country, lived there for a few years, and has spent the other 5 or 6 decades of their life living in your country, but you're still giving them shit for being, one of those guys.
The thing about the trip we took together is that I started off in Kruger Mercenary, which is an American faction. And they enhance their people with mechanicals. And when Herr Major met me, I was a fighter pilot and sensor array mechanic. Yeah. That's what I did. And I had a surgically implanted exoskeleton, and it was painful as hell. Penny on Earth had pain from it. And, bleed over pain. And I also had a set of implants that were quite visible to anyone who looked at me. And I looked more like a Borg than an American. In
Well,
fact,
that faceplate definitely doesn't help.
yeah, I had a faceplate. The Star Trek people based the Borg on the Kruger Mercenaries because
possibility, yeah.
We are so enhanced with mechanicals and chips and things of that sort that it's very hard to see the human underneath it. And then we're sent into battle or we're sent into technical situations. And Kruger only trains their people. You are taught to read, you are taught to do basic mathematics, and then you are trained for your job. Where the Germans, to their credit, take everybody and put you through school and Schule, and when you get out, you have the equivalent of a BA. And you are trained for your job. Because the Germans want somebody who can think. Kruger just wants somebody that can do their job. So, when Herr Major met me in that altar, I knew how to read, I knew how to do math, I knew how to do my job. I didn't know how to think. Because thinking wasn't required of me. And
you also didn't know how to use cutlery properly either.
I didn't know how to do a lot of things properly. And my personal uniform was khaki pants, a tank top, and a brown leather jacket that zipped. So this was, and boots. This was what I was used to wearing. Now, when I came to Nacht Waffen expects officer women to wear skirts. I had never worn one. Starbuck had never worn a skirt before that. Not once. It was not part of the Kruger experience. And so I was expected to suddenly be a lady and understand what had been taught in Schule and officer training school, and had none of that, and couldn't speak German. All I could understand was English. And over the 15 years, I learned to speak rudimentary German. I learned to follow regulations. I learned how to sit in a skirt without showing my crotch. I never did learn how to bend over in one. I did eventually stop putting my feet on the counters. But yeah, I generally wore pants. And I came from a culture of you do your job and you take it seriously because people's lives are at stake. And just before Herr Major had met me, I had died in combat. My ship had been hit by something that shattered my computer screen because my fighter ship didn't have windows. It had a screen right in front of me, and it was glass. And it had shattered that, and the pieces had come through and and cut off my skin. And since I was in a cloned body, the medics had basically gassed me, put me out, killed me. And so that alter came back to Penny and was here for 36 hours and then was installed into a new clone body. And it was the second clone body that Herr Major recruited. So I had already died in combat once. So I was a war hero and asked for a transfer from one faction to another. And apparently Nacht Waffen had to pay for the rest of my contract because I had a 20-year contract with Kruger.
That's correct. We had to purchase you.
Yeah, I was purchased. So those of you who are wondering, yes, I was slave labor because I was purchased. So when I came to Nacht Waffen, you want to tell them about the file that you got on me?
It was a hefty one. They said, you know, like, are you sure you know what you're doing? You'll be responsible for it. And I'm like, yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. But the file was hefty, and I'll be honest, like I wasn't a good officer, and I didn't read all of it, just the highlights.
So what were the highlights?
That you have issues. A lot of them.
I've never said I was perfect.
No, and your file doesn't say you're perfect either. Yeah. I'd be lying if I said I could remember a lot of it, but I remember how I felt reading it. And I got to admit, it did put a lump in my throat. I remember that. It was kind of like, oh, what have I got myself into, you know? And I remember that there were like warnings and issues and all sorts of stuff. And the impression that I got was that the impression that I got from the previous officer was that that they felt that whoever was going to be your new OC was going to be a big job. But I can't remember a whole lot, but I remember how I felt when I was reading it. Which, by the way, everybody is pretty normal for how this works. They can wipe your memories of details, but it seems to be much harder for them to remove the emotions behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can learn a lot from paying attention to how you feel about things, because on some sort of deep level that you never forget, you know.
Your subconscious still has the information. That's why regression hypnosis works.
And I remember that when we got you, you were a mess. I remember that. Yeah. But I remember I didn't do a lot of the work on you initially. Like they handed you over. I'm wanting to use the expression that they sent you to the mechanics for a good tune-up, and they handed you over to me in as best state as they could get you. So, and you know, you were rough. There's no doubt about it. You were rough. You were a rough woman. You were a good woman, a good person.
Thank you.
But
I think I am here too.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, compared to the colony women, like I think you preferred to hang out with the guys. The colony women were, you know, a bit too, what's the word?
Prissy?
Yes, prissy, I suppose. Like they could be hardcore if they had to be, but they have like that they grew up in a very clean, civilized environment
Mm-hmm.
amongst their people. So to them, you were like I'm trying to remember the feelings that I got off them. But either way, you know, you're a bit of a mess, and you know, but you know what? It was fun. I remember giving you your dress uniform, and I remember it was early, very very early on, and I said we're going to have an officers dinner. We're
Oh,
going to
yes.
have in the officers mess.
We had
I
an
said this
officer's
is.
dinner once a week, and I had to
Mhm.
have those whites absolutely spotless, pass inspection, and not spill food on myself while I ate.
Yeah, and you had to use the cutlery, and not just the spoon for everything.
Well,
Uh,
on Earth, I use a fork for most things, so.
yeah. But I was determined. I thought to myself, you know, when we are done here, I'm going to have, I'm going to try to help you as much as I could. So, you know, I was going to turn you when we came back, like our superiors were going to see a fine colony officer. That was my plan.
Well, did you?
I'd say I was 80% successful.
Well, that's better than any of the rest have done. I had these issues because the fully German officers tended to abuse me.
Mm,
The fully German officers would generally call me a Missgeburt, which translates into an abortion that lived. And that was because the CIA had shot me up with Draco DNA, and they were appalled that I was a hybrid. But at the same time, they enjoyed that I was able to do Draco things without them dropping dead in my presence,
mm,
like they would have with a full Draco. And I replaced a Draco on their ship, but at the same time, they held me to fully human standards, which were impossible for me to meet. And then some of them would order me to do things that were against regulations and were insulting. And anyone who's ever been around a Draco hybrid knows that honor is a really big deal to us. And I felt
mm.
dishonored. And since filing complaints got me nowhere, I started violence. When they would ask me to do something that was against regulations, I would fight back. So our time is up. So
Well, that was a fun little walk down memory lane there.
any last words you want to get in? You have 2 minutes.
Oh, can anything really be said in 2 minutes? Penny, I'm really proud of what you're doing here. I think you and the others being public and recalling these things so that they're on the record is a great service to humanity, whether they know it or not just yet. I think that the level of bravery and sacrifice that you're doing with this is huge. Um, Most people might not be aware of what it entails, but I am. So you know, I'm glad to know you down here, and it's been a fun couple of decades. So I'm really proud to have known you and have served with you up there, and I think it's been very therapeutic to be able to talk with someone who also experienced it. directly, you know, it helps an awful lot for a person.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.